Hey everybody, welcome to today's Kubernetes Master Class. Really happy to have you all on the line. I know we have a lot of people joining. And before we really get going, I want you all to know that we are recording this session. You will get the slides and the recording after the training. We have about a 90-minute schedule, might not use all that time, but if you need to jump off, don't worry, you'll still be able to review what we went over afterward. So we're going to be talking about 3 pillars of Kubernetes observability today. And our presenter on the line is Matt Williams, evangelist at Datadog. Matt, are you there?
I am, yes.
All right, fantastic. And I'll let Matt introduce himself a little bit more as we get going. My name is Matthew Shear. I'm the marketing manager here at Rancher. Host a lot of these training sessions and on Tuesdays and on Thursdays for our intro trainings. If for whatever reason you don't get the slides or the recording, or you have another question about a Rancher resource, please reach out, Matthew@rancher.com. Happy to help. That's what I'm here for. So I look forward to chatting with you all soon. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get going with the meat of the material. And we have 45 minutes for the presentation, plenty of time for Q&A. We do our best to not leave until every question is answered. So please, put your questions into the chat now. And so as Matt goes through his presentation, might have a moment here or there to pause and answer, and then we'll definitely get to all of them at the end. If for whatever reason you want your question to be private, just mark it as such. Otherwise, we'll answer it aloud for the benefit of everybody who's online. As I said, this session is being recorded. It'll be posted on YouTube hopefully later today if it gets processed quick enough. So you can find this session and many others on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/rancher, and you'll be able to get a lot of different topics on Kubernetes and containers and Rancher and other technologies. If you also want to get more plugged into the Rancher community, just go to slack.rancher.io, totally free to join, thousands of members, hundreds of people on there every day asking questions and answering them. This series also has its own channel, Pound Master Class. If you want to get files, or if you're looking for a recording or have a question about an upcoming training, or maybe a suggestion for a training too, you can check it out there. And we have a lot of upcoming classes every week for the rest of July. We'll be talking about persistent storage and Kubernetes, and Sheng Yang is principal engineer for Project Longhorn. We'll be presenting on that. And we also have Priyanka talking about kind of workflows and DevOps culture on July 23rd. And then we'll go into database recovery and disaster relief in August and the end of July. So stick around for those. Everything is free to join. You can join as many as you want to. And so now that all of that is out of the way, we can get into the meat of the material, why you are really here. So I'm going to pass this presentation off to Matt, make you the presenter.
Okay. I'll show my screen. Cool.
All right, I see it. You're good to go.
Okay. I was half tempted when you asked, Matt, are you there? I was half tempted to just stay quiet or fake dramatic, just to but I thought that might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, a little cruel.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Matt Williams, and you're here to listen to a presentation about the 3 pillars of Kubernetes observability. I'm an evangelist at a company called Datadog. Now, hopefully some of you have heard of Datadog. Well, hopefully a lot of you have heard of Datadog. The time that I've been at Datadog, the number of people that recognize us has definitely increased. I've been here now for about 5 years. And so maybe I've seen some of you at a conference somewhere around the world, but when I initially did a talk about Datadog, I'd asked the room, maybe 100 people, how many of you have heard of Datadog? And I'd get like 10 or 20 people raise their hand, and maybe one of them was a customer. But now so many more people know about us, which is just incredible. So so this is really 3 pillars of observability as it applies to Kubernetes, and Kubernetes specifically on Rancher. So let's, there we go. So observability, it's all about perspective. You know, whenever you build an application, you have different perspectives on that application, depending on where you're coming from. Maybe you're a front-end developer, and you just care about what's really important to you. But a database administrator, they're going to see things a little bit differently. Just like these shapes. This video is like so amazing. We're seeing basically the same idea where we've got, depending on the perspective, depending on the angle that we're looking at, we see different shapes. This is really just a mirror in front of these shapes, and somehow it's just magic. 3D printed objects that, depending on if you look at it from one direction, they appear to be square, and from a different direction, they're circles, or they're connected, or intersecting, or they're or just next to each other, or completely separate. These are just so cool. But it's a great example of how different perspectives show you different versions of the information. And it's really important to look at your applications from all the possible different perspectives, because it's very easy, if you don't pay attention to all those perspectives, it's easy to miss stuff, and maybe even miss, in the case of an application, miss an outage because you were only focused on your favorite perspective. So my name is Matt Williams. I'm an evangelist at Datadog. And if you have any questions that, let's say you have a question, you don't want to share it on the chat or in the questions for some reason, or maybe it's after the fact and you just want to ask a question to me, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm a techno-evangelist on Twitter. Yeah, here's my email, mattw@datadoghq.com. So if you can send me an email, and if you care about some of the non-work related things I do, you can find my YouTube channel at Techno-Evangelist. Now, I'm based in Boston, although the company is based in New York City. I'm here in Boston, and I'm an organizer for some events here in Boston, like DevOps Days Boston. If you've been to that in the last few years, you'll see me, as well as Serverless Days Boston, which was a lot of fun. It was just a few months ago. So who is Datadog? For those of you who aren't familiar with Datadog, we're a SaaS-based monitoring and analytics firm. We do infrastructure monitoring. We do application performance monitoring. We do log aggregation. We even do synthetics. And there's a lot of other companies that are out there that do some of these things. Maybe they just do the infrastructure monitoring, or APM, or logs, or maybe they focus on one of those and do some of the others as well. What really makes us stand out is the fact that we've got all of these things together in one UI, in one consistent UI, and we make it very easy to jump back and forth. If you're looking at metrics, very quickly get to the logs that deal with that metric, or if we're in logs, very quickly get to the traces that resulted in those logs. And we have an open source agent, so you can go to github.com/datadog/something and find our agent up there and see how we actually do what we do. And then we have integrations. We have hundreds of integrations that you can work with. And an integration, basically what that means is, that you just add a little configuration file on the agent and turn on a switch in the UI, and we start collecting metrics about that application. Let's say Postgres. So we'll collect all the metrics about Postgres, rows added per day or per hour, and other metrics, as well as logs, as well as, well, maybe not APM in that case, but we could have Postgres as part of some larger APM trace that we're collecting. And we're collecting trillions of data points every single day. It's really incredible to see just the scale of stuff that's coming in all the time from all of our customers around the world. So I'm going to make one assumption for this session. I'm going to assume that you know generally about what Kubernetes is. and I guess what it isn't. Maybe you even know you're actually using it. Maybe you even have your own pronunciation for what some people will say kube cuddle or kube control. You maybe even have your own pronunciation for that. What I'm going to assume you don't know is maybe you don't know what Rancher is, and maybe you don't know what Datadog is. Because I'm thinking that a lot of people who are in this webinar, they're existing Rancher customers and don't know about Datadog, or you're existing Datadog customers and you don't really know what Rancher is, or you just love Kubernetes and don't know what either of these things are. So I can't assume that there's any knowledge of these two things, but there is knowledge of Kubernetes. So I'm going to get started right away with a little bit of a demo. I just want to get Kubernetes running in a Rancher environment on my machine. So the best way to find out about Rancher, you've probably already been to this page, rancher.com, and you can go to the documentation and read everything there is to know about Rancher and get up and running. So this is great. And the documentation is really well written, really great, really useful, but it can be a little bit on the overwhelming side. There's a lot of information here, and if you're not totally familiar with the solution, it can kind of get a bit easy to, it can be a little easy to get lost. In fact, that was what happened to me. Every time I spin up Rancher, maybe it's been a couple of months since I last used it because I use it for demos and I use it for presentations. And it's easy for me to forget that I need to run it, it runs as a Docker container on Linux. And I try to spin up a Docker container on my Mac and I run into all sorts of issues. And I just go through the same learning curve each time just because, it's sometimes been a couple of weeks or a couple of months since I last used it. I don't know why I do that, but turns out the smart folks at Rancher thought about this and tried to make a really easy way for people to get started. And that's the quick starts. So github.com/rancher/quick start. There's a quick start for DigitalOcean and for AWS, as well as for Vagrant. And I'm using Vagrant on my local machine. And what's really great about this is that this will easily spin up a 3-node cluster, and then you can start working with Kubernetes on a 3-node cluster on your, let's say, on your laptop or on your desktop machine. So the way to work with this is to open up a command prompt, do git clone, and then the repo, and then change into that directory. I'm actually going to go into the Rancher quick start /vagrant. So once I've got that, now I can go into the configuration files to make some updates. So I just want to change it so that I've got 2 CPUs on the server, 2 gigs of memory on both the server and the nodes, and 2 CPUs per node. So nice, a little bit beefier machine. And now I can switch back over to my command prompt and run Vagrant up, and everything starts running. And so now I can just kind of sit back and relax. It definitely takes a few minutes for this to get up and running. And rather than just sitting here waiting for Vagrant to move on to the next step, we'll move on to the next step in the presentation. So when you work with your applications, how do you ensure that they're performant? And how about the platform that they're running on? And by platform, I don't just mean maybe Kubernetes or AWS or Azure or Google, but also maybe all the tools that that your application relies on. Maybe it relies on Postgres, or it relies on Postgres or Redis or something else. How do you ensure all those things are working well? And then when you do a code deploy, you make some changes, you deploy your application. How do you ensure that it still runs really well and that it's not going backwards, it's not slowing down? How do you do that? Well, in a lot of organizations, it looks kind of like this. There's a development team, they do their thing, and they throw it over the wall to QA, and they do their thing, and they throw it over the wall to operations, and well, they do their thing, and then it gets deployed, and maybe at some point somebody thinks about monitoring. But And in fact, there's even this, some people think of DevOps as being the solution here, where we have our development team that's continuing to do their thing, and QA doing their thing, and operations doing their thing. And somewhere in the middle, there's a team that works with all of these teams to do the DevOps. And maybe in some smaller organization or organization that just doesn't care about you, you got one poor soul who is the DevOps person, the person doing the DevOps that is making all this stuff work together. But DevOps isn't just about a person or about a group. It's about culture and automation and metrics and sharing. It's about getting rid of those Venn diagrams and having all these teams working together, all on the same goal, all providing different ways of observing that same application. It's all about observability. And so in order to make sure that we're looking at our application and from all the different perspectives, we kind of have to look at that application and break it down and figure out what are the different perspectives that we can use. So if the traditional view of a stack is you got a front end, you got a back end, and you got infrastructure, and you got different people working on all three of these, they all have, each person that's working on these has different perspectives. But we need to kind of rethink that and move it to more like different sides of the same cube. These are, each side is a different perspective of the same thing. Front end isn't separate from back end, which isn't separate from infrastructure. It's all one thing, and we're all looking at different perspectives of that same thing. And so if we care about infrastructure, the main data points that we're collecting are going to be metrics and logs. And we're going to be using tools like infrastructure monitoring tools and log management. So what is a metric? Well, a metric is, comes down to a few, you can describe a metric as having a few different things. The first are, if there's a name, you got to have a name, something to refer to it as system.net.bytes received, or mycoolsystem.webserver.requests received, or something like that. And then it's got a metric value. So in the case of CPU utilization, it could be 86% or 23% or something like that. I guess the metric value is just the 23 or the 86, not necessarily the percentage. And then there's a timestamp. When did this actually happen? Did it happen 2019, July, what's the date? July 9th at about 1:18 p.m. Eastern. So a timestamp, exactly when did this happen? When did this metric get collected? And then there's some tags. In this case, tags is just a single word or a single phrase file server. But most of the time, when dealing with Datadog, actually, a tag is going to be a key value pair. So role : file server, or role : web, or role : database. Or maybe I'll have region : west, or region : east. Or maybe I'll have size : large, or size : small. So all of these things come together, and that is a metric that gets stored in whatever your data, whatever your monitoring platform happens to be. So metrics are great. Metrics are often combined. You never really look at a single metric, just a single metric, a single value. You don't look at just that, because that's not very interesting. Seeing the number 83, what's that mean? Is there a story there? Not really. But when you combine them all and aggregate from lots of different machines, now we get to see, okay, this is interesting. This provides a little bit of a story. In fact, it's useful for spotting the trends and patterns that exist within your environment. So maybe you've got this if you're looking at a graph, you got the squiggly lines that's moving along, and then Monday at noon, there's a huge spike, and then Monday at midnight, or maybe at 6 p.m., there's this huge trough. And so at the end of the week, or at the end of the month, we can look back and start to identify those patterns, those trends. What does my data look like every week? And maybe have a consistent pattern every week, week after week. It's the same thing. Trough at midnight, spike at noon. So once we have these trends and these patterns, we can start establishing some alerts. Maybe if it goes over this value, or if it changes by this percentage, or it just looks weird compared to what is normally there, then trigger an alert. Metrics are really great for catching all those known unknowns. Things that you know you need to focus on. You need to focus on maybe some queue length, but you don't know what the actual value is going to be today or tomorrow. You just know you need to look at it. It's probably going to be in this range, but if it's outside of that range, well, that's really interesting to know, and I want to be notified about that. So that's what we mean by the known unknowns. Things you know to look at, but you're not really sure what the value is going to be. Logs, on the other hand, they're event-based, and they're easy to read. Well, sometimes they're easier for computers to read or systems to read than it is for humans, but generally they're pretty easy to read and easy to understand, easy to grab, easy to parse. And ideally, they're going to be really verbose and structured. Now, of course, most people will, at least most people in our world, are going to know about Nginx logs or Apache logs, and they aren't all that verbose. There might be a timestamp. There's going to be a response code, so a 200 or a 404. There's going to be, what else is there going to be? There's going to be what's the resource that's being downloaded, who's requesting it, IP address, and all that type of stuff, and some other metrics, but or other values, but not super verbose. But we like to think of logs as being this place that you always throw a lot of data and maybe structure it. Think about using JSON for your log. Each log line is a separate JSON blob. And so that's still kind of easy for a human to understand, but really, really easy for a computer or some sort of system to parse through. These logs they're really useful for finding all the details of the event. So maybe you get notified that something bad is happening, but you don't really get a lot of detail when you're looking at just a metric. But when you look at the logs, wow, there's all sorts of stuff inside there, and it's really useful for figuring out what really just happened. So essentially, it's really great for catching all those unknown unknowns, things you don't even know you need to look at, but you look in the logs like, oh, that's what's going on. You get to really understand the process, assuming that you've got logs that are verbose and structured and you're spitting a lot of data into those logs. Then it can be super, super useful. So let's change perspective a bit. Let's look at the back end. So they're also going to look at metrics and logs, but they'll probably also look at traces. And they're going to use application monitoring and log management, as well as application performance monitoring. So those other two types of tools, we've already talked about those. But traces are request-based. They let you follow the activity from request across function and service calls, and it's really super useful for figuring out where did something happen? Where in my code did something happen? How long did it take? What was the bottleneck? Is the bottleneck in this particular function or that particular function? It's super useful for that, and that kind of information is really hard to figure out from purely metrics or logs. Now we can take a different perspective. We can take a look at the perspective of the front end. And they're probably looking at really just on metrics. They're not focused on logs or traces so much, but they're going to use tools like real user monitoring as well as synthetics, which you can kind of think of as people and robots. So real user monitoring, that's a real user like you. You visit a web page, maybe it's datadog.com. What is your experience like going through that website? Real user monitoring is collecting metrics around your experience. Whereas synthetics, well, they're just bots. They're somewhere out there in the ether, somewhere on the cloud, banging on your server at a schedule, some certain schedule. And maybe they're just hitting a web page or they're following a path through that website. Real user monitoring provides that insight into how users actually use the system, and synthetics operate independently of those users. So let's jump out to a little kind of example. Okay, so it's not a real example, although we keep thinking it would be really cool to make at some point. But let's say we've got this new app called Datadog, and it's Tinder for puppies. Who doesn't love puppies? So the app is amazing. You see pictures of puppies, and everybody loves to look at puppies. Oh, who's a good boy? Oh, in fact, just as I say that, my puppy starts licking my leg. But you know, these puppies, they're so cute, and you gotta tell your friends about this app, and their friends tell their friends, and so on and so on. Wasn't that some shampoo commercial back in the 70s? Anyway, so you got this amazing app. Everybody knows about it, everybody loves it, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't respond. Something's going wrong. What just happened? How can you figure out what went wrong? How do we know that something went wrong? Because users are now having this horrible experience. What do we do? Well, there's a common way that people deal with this. They just search on Twitter or IRC or Reddit or Facebook, or name your other favorite place to go to, your company name / company name space down. And you know, I've seen this tweet so many times. I don't think I ever noticed the picture. I guess that's a school bus on fire. What is that? Anyway, so hopefully this is not your actual way that you work. You're not setting this kind of thing up, waiting for customers to say that your product is down. So we need to take a look at our application from all these different perspectives, using all these different tools, because not any one single tool is going to answer our problem or answer our questions every single time. We need to use a collection of them every single time to figure out really what is going on. So we could use real user monitoring. This is actually a screenshot from a tool called, I want to say it's Speed Curve. I think that's it. So here we're using real user monitoring, and we can see that in this case, as time goes on, 91% of users aren't actually interacting with the system. So that's probably pretty bad. And before, earlier in the day, people were working with it really well. So that's something that you can get with real user monitoring, figuring out how are people actually working with the product. How about with synthetics? How does that change things? Well, with synthetics, here I can see for different websites, there are basically bots somewhere out there that are banging on these systems and showing, you know, good performance or poor performance, and we can see what's going on. So let's give us a little scenario. You got a third-party CDN outage. You got all these puppy photos, and they're all stored on some CDN. Choose your favorite CDN. But then that CDN, you know, they often have to deal with distributed denial of service attacks. And most of them can deal with that, but you know, maybe we've got one that really suffers from that distributed denial of service attack. So if you use tools like RUM and synthetics, they can alert and show what assets are slow and not being served. But application and infrastructure monitoring, as well as application performance monitoring, they may show that everything's good, because as far as they're concerned, their application is running, everything's good. They don't really care about where the photos are. That's just kind of an afterthought. And so the fact that something is down, you know, more traditional tools, APM and infrastructure monitoring, might miss it. How about with tracing? And with tracing, here we have a collection of traces, and we're seeing latency, the latency distribution. So I see that most of my requests are actually being dealt with. Well, P90 is under 50 milliseconds, but the 50% are below 10 milliseconds, which is great. But maybe here we've got 90 within, well, okay, this is a super tight time frame, 1100 microseconds. But we start looking at this and we see that, well, actually, this could indicate some sort of problem. Maybe it's okay because it's super fast, but we see a spike at one point and we see another spike a little bit further on. Is this the behavior we're expecting? Maybe not. And so this is now something we can start to investigate. We can start looking at the actual traces. So traces usually deal with samples. So you're going to trace the entire request and then maybe only collect a sampling of those traces. But then once you identify maybe an area where there's problems, click on any one of those traces to get more detail about what's going on. And the way to read these traces is basically the top bar, that bar that goes from left to right, is the initial request, the initial function that's calling this whatever you're trying to do. And Pylon's request is making a call to Pylon's dispatch, which is making a call to dogweb base call, which is making a call to dogweb base before, and then Postgres query and some other Postgres things. So that's generally how you read these traces. And if we zoom in, we get to see this in a little bit more detail, and even zoom in really far and just scroll across the screen to see what's going on. So this is really useful to see where are my bottlenecks. Where should I, if I have X amount of hours in a day, where should I focus my time to make my application better? How about another scenario? So let's say that we're using some sort of image resizing and optimizing service. I know of many companies that have maybe they store their images somewhere, but depending on the kind of user that visits, maybe for desktop users they get one image size, and for web users they get a really compact version of that image, and you use some sort of image resizing service to do all this for you. The images are still there, the application's still there, your application, but it's just this service that goes down. And so it ends up that users are only seeing the placeholder images. With tools like Rum and synthetics, if the images aren't delivered, it's going to alert. And we have a symptom, we know that there's a problem, but we don't know why there's a problem. APM can alert on latency and show where in the code that calls are failing. We can see, oh, this call out to this image resizing service, it's just making that call and never getting an answer back. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Application monitoring, well, it might alert depending on impact to custom metrics, but it might not be able to figure out what's going on. And infrastructure monitoring, you're probably not going to get any alerts from that. Everything is just fine. There's no problems. How about with application infrastructure monitoring? So in the case of maybe you deploy some code, maybe you have experienced this yourself. I don't know. I'm assuming all of you are genius developers and haven't experienced such a thing, but somebody somewhere has deployed some code that improperly verifies password hashes. And because of that, all user logins are failing. So Rum and synthetics and even APM, they're going to catch the fact that there's these unsuccessful logins being reported, assuming that the tests actually require login. And application monitoring, well, that may alert impact on custom metrics and may help identify why. And infrastructure monitoring, you're probably not going to get any alerts because everything is fine. With application monitoring, we maybe have a bunch of metrics that are saying, it's a single value, and then we do a code deploy indicated by that little pink or purple, what color is that? Pinkish line. And all of a sudden, after that code deploy, everything drops. Well, that would indicate that there's some sort of problem here. With infrastructure monitoring, let's take another example. Like we're just too popular. Everybody loves puppies, and we're just completely out of resources. So tools like Rum and synthetics and APM and application monitoring, they're going to alert that latency is high, but they're not really going to help you identify why. But infrastructure monitoring, well, this is specifically the problem that this is designed for. They're going to be alerts on high resource use, and it's going to be able to maybe even trigger some sort of automatic remediation. So that's pretty awesome. Now, with all of these things, we're looking at, with metrics, maybe with logs, maybe with traces, we're dealing with so much information. I mentioned that we collect trillions of data points. Some of our biggest customers, maybe, we collect a huge amount of data, and which means that you're probably collecting a huge amount of data for you. And so looking at these graphs and looking at these logs and looking at all these things, it's hard for you to look in the right place at the right time. If you know which metric to look at or which logs, set of logs, or how to filter, you can generally get to the right place. But it's still hard to figure out, is this pattern that I'm seeing today, is it different than what I've seen before? And that's where things like anomaly detection come in. Now, there's a lot of different tools for anomaly detection. If you're using, maybe you're not using Datadog, you're using some other tool, there are lots of add-ons that do anomaly detection. We happen to have that built into our platform, but there's lots of different ways of identifying things that are weird in your environment. So essentially what we talked about so far, 3 pillars of observability. There's metrics, there's logs, and there's traces. And metrics are really great for catching all those known unknowns. Whereas logs, they're great for catching all those unknown unknowns. And traces really help you drill in and figure out where and how long does something take. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But how does this relate to Kubernetes and Rancher? Because everything I've talked about is generally, it works, it's true regardless of whether you're using Kubernetes at all. So let's jump back into the demo. And here we are at the end of my Vagrant build. It's finally finished. And I can open up the website for Rancher. Now, the reason I'm getting this message is, well, when you first run that Rancher Docker container, you have a few options. You can provide your own certificate, or you can have it create a certificate using a tool like Let's Encrypt. Is it Let's Encrypt? Yeah, I think that's it. Or those tools that let you generate certificates kind of using the API, as well as just creating a local certificate just for demo purposes. And that's what I've done here. That's why we got this, this warning message. So don't do this in production, but it works great for testing. But I'm gonna go ahead and proceed because I trust this site, because I wrote it, or I built it. And then I can go ahead and log in. The default username and password is admin. And then it starts provisioning and doing all the things that Rancher needs to do to get this up and running. And it's a little bit, it takes a little bit of time to do this, but it looks like now my cluster is ready to go. And right here I can see I've only got a single cluster. It's called Quick Start, super creative name. It's got 2 nodes, and there's 2 cores total and 1.8 gigs. So if I go ahead and click on Quick Start, I'll get a little bit of information about my cluster. Again, I see 2 cores, I see 2 nodes, I see what percentage of CPU and memory are being used, and I can see that all the different services within my Kubernetes cluster are all healthy. But this is just Kubernetes, so I can click on, well, it's Kubernetes made a little bit easier to work with. So here I can click on a button and get to a kube control or kubectl. Some people have strong opinions on the way to pronounce this. I just go with every possible pronunciation I can think of. Kubectl. Let's go with kubectl or kube. So hard to pick one. Anyway, we've got this tool and we can go ahead and say kubectl get nodes or get pods or whatever tool commands we want to run here. Or we can go over to the kubeconfig file, copy this file into our home directory /.kube/config, and then go into a command prompt and just run kubectl there, kubectl get nodes. Looks like I've chosen kubectl as the right way to say it. So now I see all my nodes, I see what roles they have and what version. Just standard Kubernetes commands. It's just Kubernetes. Yes, it's Rancher, but it's just Kubernetes. So I'm going to go ahead and run an application. This is an application that we have created for our learning platform, and it relies on Redis and Postgres. And if we switch back over to the Rancher dashboard and look at my workloads, I can see that Postgres and Redis have started just a few seconds ago, and one was about a minute ago. But this application is going to kind of replicate a water department, a water filtering department. I don't know, water supply for a few different cities. I'll go back to my command line and start applying a bunch of other YAML files to spin up all the different services that use this. As I mentioned, this is all part of an application that we use on our learning platform. That's learn.datadoghq.com. If you're curious about learning about Datadog, about APM, about logs, about basics of Datadog, or about monitoring Kubernetes, or lots of the other things that we work with, go to learn.datadoghq.com. Each of the course, it's free to sign up, free to take all the courses. You just do a little bit of registration because we create new demo accounts for you. We want to make sure that these you're playing around with and learning on equipment that's completely separate from your production environment. So that's why we have you create an account. And then we automatically spin up some lab machines that you can try this stuff out on. So again, this is one of the applications, and I guess one of the benefits of taking the cloud courses is you'll see a video with me. Okay, so let's go back to our Rancher dashboard. We can see all our services listed out here. And now I can even click on this link for 3001, or actually 30,001 TCP, and that'll open up our water demand application. Let's just take a look through here. We see the different pumps, we see different cities, and we can add cities, and we can generate some API traffic that will be really useful when we start monitoring this. But this is just a nice, simple demo application. Let's say that we want to start monitoring. How do we monitor just with Kubernetes and just with Rancher? Well, I can very quickly turn on monitoring. And what this is going to do, it's going to spin up some pods for Prometheus and Grafana. And it looks like it's getting ready to start. So I'll switch over to, I'm just waiting for all my metric, all the monitoring API to become available. It looks like it's just become available. And so I can see some Grafana icons. I can scroll down and see metrics built into the Rancher dashboard, which is super nice. Yeah, so we can play around with metrics here. We can click the link to go into more detail in Grafana. So they make it really, really easy to get started with collecting metrics in Rancher on Kubernetes, spin everything up for you. But you do have to make sure that you've got the resources available for your Grafana and Prometheus nodes. So it's just something that you have to, since you're basically managing your own monitoring platform, you need to make sure you have the resources to do that. Let's go down to my application. I'm just going to generate some bogus API traffic. And then we can come into the Grafana cluster and see that information start updating every few seconds. We'll see, yep, we see our dashboards updating, CPU utilization is kind of moving around a little bit. Oh, that's good enough. Okay, so now, what should we do now? We're gonna go back into the Rancher dashboard and take a look at what's involved in turning on logging. Well, logging, they don't make quite as easy as it was with monitoring. Now it's up to you to spin up a Elasticsearch pod or Splunk or Kafka or syslog or something else to collect all these logs, and it's up to you to configure all that. But they make it pretty easy to get started with. But we can also set up alerts as well right here within the Rancher dashboard. We're going to add an alert rule and go from there. Cool. But it's still a lot of work. It's still a lot for me to configure, a lot for me to have to do. So let's take a look at what's involved doing the same thing with Datadog. Cool. So I'm going to switch over to, oops, looks like I did that twice. What's going on here? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch Datadog. So Rancher's made it super easy to do this. You can just go into the catalog and you can choose Datadog from the library. There's a whole bunch of applications that are available from here, but I'll click on View Details. Click on View Details. Come on. And I can scroll down and start configuring this. So I'll give it a nice name. Datadog Agent is a lovely name for this. And maybe do cluster monitoring. And then I can turn on cluster agent metrics, go ahead and add my app key from my Datadog application. So I'll go ahead and blur these out for you so you don't see anything super secret. And copy them into the Rancher dashboard. Do the same thing with the API key and then scroll down. And now I can start configuring all the other things that you would normally have to do in the config file. So enable APM, enable the live process agent. I definitely want to collect logs. And then click on launch. And now Datadog Agent is getting up and running. It's starting to, it's deploying, and we should be good to go in just a few minutes. Now, I just want to go back to the Rancher dashboard. You can see that cluster monitoring and project monitoring is actually disabled. I have a separate cluster being used here, so we don't have any of those things turned on. And we just have the Datadog pod running, collecting all the metrics. Basically one per node, and now all that was automatically configured by Rancher. So if we switch over to Datadog, I can sometimes take a few minutes for metrics and events to show up, but here we see the events showing up in Datadog. And basically we do everything from this one UI. We don't have to jump around to different applications to look at logs and events and metrics. We do everything from this one UI. And maybe I'll switch over to logs and click on search, and I can see all my logs in one place. Let's get rid of this little splash screen the first time we visit. But we can scroll through here, click on any one of them, and get more detail about one particular log line. So this one says cannot connect to Redis. This would be an interesting thing to troubleshoot, to figure out why, what did I do wrong? How did I configure this wrong? But we can kind of tab through or scroll through each of the different log lines to see what's going on here. But there's a lot of stuff, and it's hard to know what do all my logs look like. So I can look at an analysis, but even more interesting is this pattern explorer. So here I can see that out of my 332 events, this is because we've only just started this cluster, but and in most cases you'll have more like 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000 lines. It's really hard to identify the patterns when you're just using your eyes to sift through this stuff. But here I can see 108 of these out of these 332 all generally look the same. They've got a date, pipe core, pipe info, pipe path, and then some sort of check. And then there's 84 lines that are kind of like that, except they say done running check. And then there's 44 that have some sort of error in a check. This is a great place for me to now spend some time troubleshooting, trying to figure out what's going on. Let's switch over to APM. I can see a nice service map, and even get a little bit more detail, choose service overview, and get more of the, what are the actual traces that are being collected. I can go scroll down and maybe click on one of these traces to get the full trace for this request that comes in. Remember that traces are tracking the request as it comes in. So a request comes in from outside, it touches a bunch of services. In this case, there's a Flask request get simulate sensors at the top. That's that kind of parent process, which is calling Flask dispatch request, which is calling API simulate sensors, which is calling request requests, and so forth. You can see how that flows down through the trace. We can also jump over, once we've got that one agent, it's just that one agent that you install, and then we can get all this other great information, like this process view. I can see what are the processes that are running within my Kubernetes environment. In fact, I'll just click here. I can see the actual command. I can see some high-level metrics about this command that are just for this command, not looking at everything, just looking at this one command. Maybe I want to take a look at the infrastructure list. Well, there's only a couple of nodes here, but I can also take a look at, we'll go to the containers view. So show me all the containers that are running maybe in this Kubernetes on Rancher, but also maybe we've got some Docker on AWS or Docker on my desk. Look at all of those things and see the actual processes that are running inside of each of these containers. Super useful stuff that's really hard to get to any other way. We even have our dashboards. So dashboards with metrics, scroll through. Again, this only just started up, so got minimal information in here. And then of course we got synthetics. So let's go ahead and create a new browser test. I would put my Rancher dashboard in here, except it's a private, it's just on my local machine. So I'll go ahead and start monitoring my personal website, technoevangelist.com. I'll turn on laptop large and tablet and maybe run the test every 30 minutes. You know, if I hit some sort of weird condition, I can alert my teammates. But here's my super simple, super ugly website. I can start recording and say, maybe I wanted to go there, and then I want to go to this AR750 router review, and then I'll stop that and scroll down and maybe hit this using Touch ID for authorizing sudo, and maybe that's all I want to do. So I'll go up to the left and click on Stop Recording, and then then I need to scroll down and launch this test. So now I just kind of sit here and wait a little bit for results to come in. So it should take just a few seconds for it to come in. So, okay, so now I'll scroll down and I can start seeing the results coming in. I see this, you know, that flow is being replicated in Frankfurt, but then I'll scroll down a little bit further and I can see that it was actually done in Frankfurt and Tokyo and London and Ohio and all these other places. So all these, my website is being tested from all these places all around the world. Super, super cool. So how do we get to 100% visibility? You really need to think about your system as a whole, and I want to try to get multiple perspectives. You want to think about what's your application look like from the front end, from the back end, from the infrastructure perspectives, and also the you know, how would ops look at this? How would dev look at this? How would QA look at this? Think of all those different perspectives and consider all the different observability tools that you have available to you. You know, here are 5 of them that I covered in this presentation, but maybe there's others that you find really useful or others that have yet to be created that are coming down the pike. You want to start with the end in mind. You know, it's so easy to get overwhelmed with all these metrics. There are hundreds. You know, some of our customers might be collecting thousands and thousands and thousands of metrics every 15 seconds. It's hard to know, what metric do I focus on? Well, you should really start with the end in mind. You should start with that customer, that end user. What is most important for them? Is it generating widgets? Is it making sure the website is super fast? Start there and figure out what are the metrics that relate to that show you that those goals are being met. Take a look at errors and latency. Well, what levels are acceptable? Maybe look at P95 and P99 and try to go as high level as possible. You want to monitor all those application endpoints. You're using application performance tools. We've got a great one, but there's other ones out there, New Relic or AWS X-Ray or lots of other tools, and look at the overall requests. But of course, everything fails at some point, so plan for it. Make sure you're thinking about what is the right response to something. Think about how you would spread this application across multiple regions, or how do you retry if something fails. Try to design for smarter alerting, make better metrics. You know, this isn't a install on day 1, set up all the alerts on day 2, and then you're done and you just sit and watch. you have to keep updating this. You have to realize, well, maybe that metric wasn't the right metric, or maybe it was, but the alert levels weren't right because it wasn't right for me. Or maybe the logs were filtering based on the wrong thing, or I'm not recording enough stuff in my logs. I'm not looking at the right traces. I'm not sampling the right amount. I'm recording too many traces, or not enough traces. Have the runbooks and playbooks in place to help you respond when something bad happens. So runbook, a documented and surface set of steps and context, includes the dashboards and logs and traces, maybe even the synthetic traces. It provides some pre-approved actions and something that's really easy to follow and convenient to follow. Not just convenient to follow at, let's see, it's 1:56 p.m. right now, but at 1:56 a.m. or 4 a.m. after a night of drinking. How is it convenient to follow at that point when you're in that state? So try to automate where possible, but sometimes that's not possible. For better logs, just try to get as much information in there. Once you've got the information there, it's great to use that information in Datadog or whatever log management tool you're using. Output the payloads and responses, and try to aggregate logs across the entire trace. So in summary, what have we looked at? We looked at, just consider all the different perspectives. All those, if you just focus on metrics, or you just focus on logs, or you just focus on traces, it's easy to miss really important things. And it's easy to not realize that there's a problem. Well, maybe you should also have that Twitter search in place looking for your company name and down if all you're doing is relying on APM or logs or metrics. You want to have all these things in place. You want to design and well, you want to measure what truly matters. And what truly matters is what matters to the customer or to the end user. And design and track those key metrics. Have those metrics and logs and traces surface smartly during an incident, and have some way to react. When you've looked at this application from all these perspectives and you see that something is going wrong, have a well-defined next step that helps you helps you solve the problem. And that brings me to the end. So my name is Matt Williams. I'm an evangelist here at Datadog. Again, if you have any questions, you can, well, there was a chat window, there's also a questions window, but you can also send me a tweet. I'm a Techno Evangelist on Twitter, or you can watch my silly videos on YouTube, Techno Evangelist. Unfortunately, the YouTube channel has taken a little bit of a taken a little bit of a pause as my wife and I adopted a baby girl, and it's just too many other things that are more important than updating that. But I'll get back to it soon. Anyway, email mattw@datadoghq.com, and hopefully, who knows, maybe I'll see you at the next DevOps Days Boston or Serverless Days Boston. And with that, we're at the end. So I think we have some questions.
Yes, sir. Matthew, amazing. Thank you so much for going through all that. I'll just read some of these questions aloud. And for those who haven't asked your question yet, please do, because if we get through these, then we'll think it's the end, and then we'll end the session. But if you have more questions, just post them now. So this first one is from Odso, who asks, what's the difference between application monitoring and APM?
Yeah. So the way we think of application monitoring, I guess is probably thinking about it now, perhaps a poor choice of words, but it's application and infrastructure monitoring are both looking at the metrics, purely at the metrics. For Datadog, that was what our business was originally, was just looking at the application metrics and the infrastructure metrics. So your application, it produces widgets, and at the end of the day, it has produced 1,000 widgets per day or 10 widgets per hour. And that metric, 10 or 1,000, that's one of the metrics that you might collect. And so that's what we refer to as application monitoring, looking at those metrics, figuring out what's going on based on those metrics. Whereas APM is looking at the traces, which provide a lot more detail than a single metric or a single aggregated metric or a line of metrics. Traces go into a far more detail, which is application performance monitoring, far more detail about that one request. What's actually going on? Where are my bottlenecks? Where, as a developer, where should I focus my time? Let me focus on the low-hanging fruit so I can make everything faster by just focusing on those. And you can kind of get to some of the same information with both application performance monitoring and application monitoring or metrics, but it's a lot easier if you have both. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, that's great. And a couple other people had a similar question about the difference. So thank you for that. Okay,
now,
here's the next one.
It turns out in this industry of monitoring or metrics or APM, it turns out that a lot of people keep using the same words for different things, and it can get kind of confusing.
Right, we'll have to create a glossary with this. Okay, cool. So here's the next one. This is from Janet. She has a few questions. Here's the first. She says, we use a lot of Java here, and Java errors spool out in an unfriendly way. Can Datadog handle multi-line log files like Java errors?
I want to say yes, but I personally don't spend a lot of time with Java, but I want to say yes. Not just because I like saying yes, but because I think actually the answer is yes. But I'm not 100% on that. So we can probably answer that afterwards and get that back to you.
Okay, great, cool. And yeah, Janet, if you want to tweet Matt, you can ask there, and also we will try to email you after when we do our follow-up. This is a second question from Janet. She asks, is there an easy method to download logs for further processing by developers? Is there a cost involved with downloading logs?
Man, you've asked two questions that I don't have the answer for. Oh, I hate it. I love it. I love getting hard questions, but I hate not having the answer. Again, I'll have to get back on that one.
Okay, no problem.
I assume you mean like within Datadog. Is there an easy method within Datadog to download those for further processing? I think, I mean, in a lot of cases, we have a lot of great, processing tools built into Datadog, but I can see if there's ways to download that.
Okay, cool. So we'll just keep with these tough questions from Janet. Here's the next one. Is it possible to create custom scripts that feed Datadog with information? We have a number of Perl scripts that feed tools like Nagios. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Nagios.
That's another one that has different pronunciations. Nagios, too many.
Okay, I'll go with Nagios.
Yeah.
With very application-specific information, can this port to Datadog?
Absolutely. There's a number of different ways of feeding information to Datadog. Most of the time, we're in most of the examples that you find online, we're actually using Python, but you could. There's a number of third-party libraries that work with Datadog as well. That I'm not sure if Perl is in that list, but there's many languages that you can use. But then it's just a simple RESTful API. And I thought I turned off every ringer in my house, but I managed to find one that is still ringing. Okay. Stop. Hold on. Turning volume down. Throwing this out. Okay. So basically it's a RESTful API that you can pass new information to Datadog. In fact, you can also, if you go to github.com/Datadog/integrations extras, you can create your own integration. Might take a little bit more work, but you can totally customize it for whatever it is, whatever metrics that you want to collect, or whatever logs that you want to collect, and feed all that information into Datadog.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. Here's the next one. Can we provide Datadog user accounts that are restricted to access only pods, logs, data in a particular namespace and/or project?
So you only want to access, don't think we have an answer for restricting access to only certain logs or only certain pods. No, I want to say the answer there is no.
Okay.
Verify.
Yeah,
But
cool.
actually, for a lot of these, if you have specific Datadog questions, often the best answer is just to reach out to our support team. If you're an existing Datadog customer, you know about how to access support, but it's definitely plastered all over our website, as well as if you go open up the Datadog application and you're on the trial, down in the, I think somewhere there's a chat window, and that's going to open up to support. There's also, you can go to chat.datadoghq.com, and that will sign you up to our Slack, public Slack, and you can ask questions there as well.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Here is the next one. This is from Michael, who asks, can you...
No more from Jenna?
I know, right? I'm sure there'll be some more. Just give her some time.
Okay.
Okay, this one is from Michael, who asks, can you talk a little bit about how to ensure your monitoring complies with security restrictions, for instance, PCI DSS systems and personal information?
So I wonder if this is specifically around Datadog or just around all monitoring. If it's specifically about Datadog, I definitely do not know all the intricacies of PCI or any of these things, but I know that datadog.com/security goes through a number of those. That may be your best bet. Again, support might be a better bet for that, but I can find out if there's a more official answer for that.
Okay, cool. Okay, Michael will follow up with you. This is the next one from Jacob, who says, you mentioned log sampling. Can you talk about that briefly a little more in just a high-level theory?
What, you skipped over Gabriel's? Matt, you're very cool.
Yeah, so I was going to leave that to the end.
Okay. Okay, you mentioned log sampling. Can you talk about that briefly? Yeah, so log sampling, we're going to do sampling at a number of different places when we initially collect logs, depending on the traffic. In fact, there's a great article in the documentation that talks about how logs are sampled, and some of it is sampled at the agent level, some of it at the server, at the Datadog.com level. And some of that is customizable as well. But the way that we do it depends on how much traffic is being generated, how much will get sampled. So, if you only have a few messages, you're not only going to end up with one because of a large sampling. But there's a great article on the documentation site. Go to docs.datadoghq.com and do a search for, I think you can probably just search for log sample.
Okay, cool. Here's the next one. This is from Rushi, I believe. How do you differentiate between Dynatrace and Datadog? Could you talk about pros and cons features?
So there's a lot of different vendors out there. There's Dynatrace or SignalFX or there's so many other tools. Somebody else already mentioned Nagios, which you would be building out yourself, or Prometheus, or Grafana, or there's so many tools out there, and we all have different specialties. I don't spend as much time as I probably should on what's really strong with Dynatrace. I mean, they've been around for a long time, and so I know that they're really good in some areas. I'm just not familiar enough with what they are really great at.
Okay, cool, no problem. Okay, here's the next one. This is a two-parter, so let's do the first part. This is from Daniel, who says, during the presentation, we saw the links between the application stack and the back end. Was the relationship between the different components discovered by the agent, or did it need to be configured?
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, if we're looking at, we're in a dashboard and we're looking at a particular metric, we know when you click on that metric, we know what hosts are being aggregated in that metric. Sometimes you might have a template variable that further filters that down to maybe, let's say we're just looking at one host, host Matt's cool computer. If I hit the right button to show the context menu, then I'm going to be able to jump to logs. And it's pretty easy to filter that down to the right logs because, well, we've got the host name. So it's not configured so much in the agent, but whatever similarities we can find, that's the way that we're going to filter that down. Hopefully that answered that. What's the next one?
Yeah, so this is the second part, follow-up question. Is there a recommended way that you have to discover the relationships or dependencies between different components of the application?
I don't know.
Okay, all right, no problem.
I don't know. Yeah. One thing you'll find with me is I will not make up answers. So if I don't know, I don't know. But we'll figure out the right answer and get back to you.
Okay, cool. All right, here, and Daniel says thanks. Thanks for those answers. Okay, so here, this looks like the last one that has been asked. So anybody, if you do have a question, now is the time to post it. This is from Rushi, following up about the Dynatrace conversation. He says, do you position yourself as a PM? That's pertaining to the Dynatrace.
Yeah. So I mean, APM is one piece of what we do. Where if you're comparing specifically against Dynatrace, they've definitely had a very strong product for a very long time. But we think that we also have a very strong product. And so, yes, we do definitely have APM as part of our solution, and and that APM works with your applications that are written in C# or Java or Node.js or Python or Go or and many other languages coming. Probably miss a language that we already support as well. So there are many tools out there. Which one is right for you depends on what are your specific scenarios. One thing that is really great about Dynatrace and about Datadog and about so many other tools that are out there is that I think we pretty much all, at least Datadog does, offer these free trials. So take a look at the free trial for Datadog. It's a 2-week free trial, gives you full access to everything, no credit card required, as well as the learning platform. I mentioned before, learn.datadoghq.com. You'll see videos of me talking about different technologies inside of Datadog, and maybe that will help you decide which is a better APM for you in your particular scenario.
Okay, great. Well, I will just read this last comment that just came in pertaining to this conversation about Datadog versus Dynatrace. This is from Jacob, and he says, my company used Dynatrace, and holy cow, boo, Datadog's way better. Dynatrace was a nightmare of risk, failed monitoring, poor customer service. So one personal example.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that is it for the questions. Anything else you want to leave us with, Matt, before I close this up?
I'm trying to think of something amazing. In fact, as I was trying to think of something amazing to say, and I couldn't think of anything, which reminded me, if we've got like a couple extra seconds, I'll tell you one little story. Yeah. So many years ago, I was in Seattle. I was working at Microsoft. It was this amazing thing. I was building a demo. In fact, I had the demo ready. Bill Gates was up on stage. He was up there with, God, what was his last name? Mike Coleman, who's now, I think he's now at Docker, but he's a product manager at Microsoft. And he plugs in his camera into the, we're talking about Windows XP at the time, plugs in his camera into the computer, and everything starts shaking. The whole hotel starts shaking. In fact, all of Seattle starts shaking because it's the Nisqually earthquake. I run for a door frame. Bill Gates 5 seconds later, joins me in this door frame. And here's my chance to soar through the ranks, to fly through and become really important at Microsoft. All I need to do is think of something really smart to say. I look at him, I keep looking at him, we both smile at each other, and all I can come up with is, wow, this is cool. So whenever somebody says, do you have anything really wonderful to end this conversation with? I always think of that and think of, wow, this was really cool.
This was really cool. Wow, it was earth shaking. So that is fantastic. All right, well that's pretty much it, everybody. I am so happy that Matt could join us and give us these great stories and lessons in monitoring. I'm gonna just show a couple last slides, just for those who are new to Rancher. Maybe haven't tried us before. Rancher is totally open source, 100% free to download. There's no hidden features, no community versus enterprise edition, nothing like that. It is enterprise level software for container and Kubernetes management. So it has lifestyle improvements for the developers and for operations, for those consuming Kubernetes or those managing Kubernetes around security, pod policy, quotas, resource management, all sorts of things like that. We saw a little bit of it today. It works on any cluster, any custom Kubernetes cluster as well. You can get started really easily with quick start guides, as Matt mentioned earlier. Just go to rancher.com and click the Get Started button in the top right. It'll bring you to these quick start guides, and you can get up and running in just a couple minutes. We also have a lot of other open source projects, Rancher OS, RKE. We actually have a K3S training tomorrow. K3S is lightweight Kubernetes distribution. So if you're interested in running Kubernetes on the edge or ARM or something like that, that might be a really good option for you. And with that, thank you so much. We have another one of these trainings next Tuesday on persistent storage. So hopefully we'll see you again, and we will be sending out the recording and the slides after this presentation. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.